Oh, g'day. Well, welcome to the hobby room. Just getting the morning coffee in there. Now, look, I love my skull modelling, right? I really do. Any of you that have watched my channel know I'm pretty enthusiastic about it, okay? I really enjoy it. I don't take it too seriously. I have a lot of fun. I mean, sometimes I get down into the details. Sometimes I just don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. And there's a great modelling community out there I get a lot of support from, and you're a great bunch of guys. And, you really encourage me to keep doing what I'm doing. And sometimes the things that I'm sharing sort of come back to me that people have really enjoyed the idea that I've come up with, or the way I looked at something, and it's helped them out. And it's great. It's all give and take, all right? Nobody's in charge. No, everyone wins a prize. So, not quite, but you know what I mean. We all get along. Except for there's one little group who got to come in and spoil it for everybody else. Now, before I name them, let's just to get one thing straight. I mean, I like to put detail on my models. I like to research sometimes and find out exactly what something's like, I do all that. I often will count my own rivets, right? But the emphasis there is my own, okay? I'm doing it for me. And it's perfectly okay for anybody to get their model as accurate as they want and to count their own rivets and do it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But the people that piss me off are the rivet counters who do it without permission, okay? So if you come along and you start counting my rivets when I haven't asked for it, I don't need it, you don't even ask me if I'd like some information, you just start ramming it down my throat, those are the people I don't like, and it's why we created the group Fucker the Rivet Counters, right? Because I was sick and tired of those sort of people. It's ridiculous. But you can count your own rivets, all right? You can be accurate, you can do anything. I can't stop you doing that, and why should I? I mean, you can't stop me doing what I'm doing. But you can't go and push your ideals and your beliefs on other people. Oh, that's been going on in history, hasn't it? Yes, exactly, and this is a problem. There's that mentality that think their way or the highway. And I won't stand for that. So I'm going to make this video and I'm going to talk about various kinds of rivet counters, because there are genres, some are worse than others, right? And look, if you haven't got a sense of humour, turn off now, because a lot of what I'm going to say are just jokes, okay? We're going to have fun with it. But there's an element of truth in there as well. So if you haven't got a funny bone, bugger off. For the rest of you, here we go. Roll the music. The first kind of rivet counters I want to talk about are the aircraft rivet counters. Now, as far as I can tell, this problem stems from them building Tamiya kits, right? And the reason is they buy them because they're incredibly accurate and they fit together really well and they go together fast. These are the guys that aren't actually modelers, they're just assemblers and they can't be bothered actually engineering or modelling anything, right? So, bang! They spend all this money, click, 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 shake and bake, bang! Instant model. Oh dear. I've just spent all this money on this thing and it's built. What am I going to do with the rest of my time? Well, it's obvious. This is where it all started, okay? So suddenly they've had to dream up ways of intricately doing the inside of the cockpit and, and painting every knob and dial. And that's fine if you want to do that. That's really good. That's all right, That's terrific. And the fact that the canopy's going to go over the top, you're never going to bloody see any of it. Yeah, sure, go for it, But if that's your thing, that's fine. But the trouble is they go further. They start carrying on with bloody shading lines and pre-shading and modular, all this stuff. Have you guys ever actually looked at real aircraft? Have you ever really looked at panel lines? They're a lot of the time they're invisible, and most of the time they're just a faint line, if anything. And if you've got shading between a panel line, that means your join is like that, which is not aerodynamic. Okay, so that's not how it works. That's not the science of flying aeroplanes, all right? Everything's supposed to be flush. So all this pre-shading and all this stuff, which I think they've invented to give themselves something to do and then give them an excuse to complain about everyone else that isn't doing all this bullshit that they're doing, right? And they're trying to justify it all. Okay, there are photos of some aircraft that have got the odd panel that curves and all the rest of it. There certainly are shots of aircraft or photos of aircraft where they've got a lot of weathering. They've got either wear and tear on the wings, sort of like Becker's doing like the Hellcats. He's emulating photos, so he's actually doing something from a photo, and yeah, that's okay. So he's doing a good job. That's a real thing. And there's, I did my bow fighter, and I made it up like the ones that were up at Port Moresby, so they were landing on muddy dirt strips and everything and getting lots of chips and all the rest of it. In fact, I got rivet counted for my Beaufighter being over-weathered. And all I had to do was put up a photograph and go, there you go, dickheads. That's the one that I did. Again, all these know-it-alls that think they, but honestly, they over-weather their aircraft, they over-panel shade their aircraft, they go massively crazy on all the bloody panel lines. Look, it's fine, it's art, I'll agree, and that is one way to depict it, and that's fine. If that's what you want to do, great. But don't go telling me I have to pre-shade, and don't go telling me that I have to modulate, and don't go telling me that I need to get out my bloody panel line thing and do it. No, I don't. Most of these things are totally sheer and smooth, and the sheer and the shadows from natural light will actually give all the shading you need. And this is the thing, I think these aircraft guys, because they'd spent all this money, the thing built in 5 seconds because they're building Tamiya kits, right? So they had nothing to do. So they had to find things to do. So they invented all these things they had to do, and then to justify all these strange techniques that they came up with, which are completely unrealistic, they then shouted down everyone else, said, you're doing it wrong, because I've spent too much money on this thing and I've got nothing to do and I've got to justify my time because I've... Yes, have a think about it. There's some truth in that. Okay, moving on. Alright, next on the hit parade, and probably equal with the aircraft, are the Armour guys. Okay? Now, again, the Spanish method, right? The absurdity of these heavily rusted out and chipped to buggery tanks. Russian T-34s have an average lifespan of 3 days. 3 days. You're not going to get chipped much. You might get a bit of mud on it and everything. You're certainly not going to get it rusted, okay? Most of the tanks that were in the war, they live for months, right? Days sometimes. Months at the most. Occasionally one might last a year or so. Basically, if there were, it was an Italian tank because it was always going backwards, or the French tank because they had to break for lunch, have wine, for, cheese, that sort of thing. But basically, this over-weathering of tanks and then this whole thing, genre of doing the Spanish method and going bloody crazy, unless you've got a photograph of a rusted out one, like, that is 50 years old, it's been sitting somewhere as like a monument or something, and yeah, it's rusty, and sure, copy that, that's pretty good. But again, I don't care. If you want to over-rust your tanks, I used the method because I sort of was learning it and was thinking it was kind of silly, but I did it on the, it's not a, the point of the thing is this particular tank, right, never saw active combat. So I had done one that was kind of a little bit chipped and weathered and all the rest of it, and I sort of gunked it up and mud on it, and I got rivet counted on that, probably fairly so in this case, because the guy said, look, my father used to drive those, and they never saw active service, and basically they kept them clean as a whistle. So the museum piece ones you see, that's pretty well what they look like. Whereas I'd gone to the extreme and I'd sort of, weathered it all up, okay? I didn't mind too much then because he was very nice about it. He said, look, did you know? Not a, hey, you dickhead, you've got it wrong. When someone comes in with that or starts slamming me, I'll just delete, ignore, whatever, block. But if someone says, hey, look, I don't know if you're aware of it, and I just thought I'd share this with you, which means they're being nice about it. I know this. Did you know that? And then I can respond with, oh, great, as I did with this guy. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I never really sort of thought that through. Fair enough. Well, mine's the one that snuck away. It actually was. It's like a what if. And he went, okay, fair enough. As long as you know they didn't really get rusty or chipped or dirty. It just didn't happen. So this is the thing. With these tanks, people will get all excited about, that one had Zimmerit on it, right? This German tank had Zimmerit, had to have Zimmerit. You've got to buy Zimmerit with that tank. I was told this by a certain model that I don't talk to anymore. You must have Zimmerit with your Panzer. With your Panther. No. Zimmerit was around from basically middle of 1943 to September 1944, right? And it was coming out of the factory towards the end of 1943, and it was issued on the tanks that came out. It was supplied in the field if they want to use it. But there would have been some with, some without, and there would have been varying degrees. And then in about mid-1944, they found, although the thing was supposed to be, if you don't know, the Zimmerit's sort of a compound that you put on there so that magnetic explosives can't stick to the metal in the tank and blow you up, okay? So the Russians were doing this. They had magnetic sort of explosives. They'd throw, it'd magnetise on the side of the tank, kaboom, no more tank. So the Zimmerit was supposed to protect against that. Trouble is, by the time they got the Zimmerit out, they got all that, they kind of were finishing on the Russian front, and they were more, basically, the D-Day invasion, all that sort of thing happened later on, and was basically that part of the offensive. And they didn't use magnetic incendiary devices. I mean, I think they use a sticky kind of one with a bit of sort of glue on there, you know, a bit of Tamiya thin or something, and they threw it on, and it stuck on the tank, okay? The other thing they found is that the Zimmerit actually was combustible. So, okay, as long as the thing fell off, you're fine. But if it didn't fall off, it kind of, something stuck to the tank, and then the Zimmerit went up, boom, you know, it's like the plastic ceiling tile problem. Remember those plastic ceiling tiles? Then they found if one went off, the whole house just burnt down, right? So this is the thing. Zimmerit could be on, could be off. Both instances are correct. For someone to tell you, you must have Zimmerit on your tank, that's bullshit. That's not necessary. I mean, if you found a picture of a tank of that period and it didn't have Zimmerit on it, as I have with my Panther, right? I found a photo of the particular war I'm doing. No Zimmerit, bare metal. So what I'm doing is perfectly okay. And this is the same with a lot of things. They'll whinge on about Panzer Grey. Oh, for God's sake. Panzer Grey is just a dark grey, okay? That's all it was. And in fact, very few tanks were actually Panzer Grey. And it certainly wasn't blue. It certainly wasn't green, okay? If you did have a grey tank and you were basically in a big open area where there's lots of sky, or you're in a city, right, where you just got light reflected off buildings, that light is predominantly blue, and your grey object will appear slightly blue. It is an illusion, but it kind of looks that way. If you're in a forest and you've got a grey object and you're driving around, you've got dappled light through there, right, you get yellows and greens. We reflected and dappled through the trees, and there your grey will look a little bit green, right? If you're out in the desert, right, and all you've got is sun and yellow sand, and you have a grey object, all right, the reflected light on it will turn that slightly yellowish, slightly brown, okay? This is what light is. Light is not just, you know, well, what colours are. Colours and light are things that interact with each other. So light has different colours on different times of day in different environments, and what your subject is can change. Ships are like that too. I've gone on about this, about grey on the ships, how the hull can be a totally different colour depending on the colour of the sea it's in. You know, green seas, blue seas, black seas, you know, very clear seas, aqua seas, all change the colour of the ship. Okay, so this thing. And the grey all the way through the ship changes as you go up because you get different light reflecting. You get water reflecting of one colour and you get like that. But it doesn't matter. If you paint your ship just all one colour grey, fine. You don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with that. I don't. I do what I do and I explain why. That's because that's what I want. But I don't expect you to. And the trouble with all these tank guys is you've got to have this, you've got to have Panzer Grey, you've got to have Zimmerit, you've got to do that. You know, the British tanks were like this. And you know, so many links, and oh dear, you can't have it around like, and like link direction. That's an interesting one. I got Rivet Counter on link direction once. Okay? Then I found a photo and said, got put on in the field backwards. In fact, one set of track links go one way, one go the other. These were German Panzer tracks, so it didn't matter. They're kind of symmetrical where they go on, right? It doesn't really matter. But, you know, they weren't as from the factory. It can happen. The thing is, with the tanks, any kind of accessories and whatever is probably viable. Any kind of camo scheme, to a point, is viable because they use whatever they can find in the field. Over-weathering? Absurd. Unless you're doing a model of a wreck or something that's been sitting there, a museum, or, you know, more of a monument model that's been out in the weather. Sure, that could be rust and the rest of it. But otherwise, tanks, like anybody's equipment, are kept relatively clean, and they might get a little bit dusty, and, you know, might get a little bit of chipped, and sure. This is the thing. The Rivet Counters will just do your head in. Basically, they don't know. They only think they know. All right, moving on. Coffee break. All right, ships and boats. Now, the joyful news here is there is mostly and generally no river counting. I mean, there are certain instances where there's a little bit of discussion and disagreement, but generally the boating community is pretty bloody good, I must say. The more I build my boats and my ships, the less I get bullshit, okay? Because, you know why? Because those subjects are basically usually sort of smaller scales. There's a lot more going on, right? There are instances that are not, but basically, you know, 1 350 scale, 1 700 scale, even 1 200 scale. You are so intense on all the tiny little things that you're doing and all the pieces that you're adding. There is usually tons of photographic evidence, so you might check what does that thing really look like, okay? Most of the kit manufacturers get it pretty right. There are instances of some pretty poor kits, but we all know them all, and they're good starter kits. And when someone starts with one of those, well, we wouldn't pull it apart for them because we'd like them to be building in the ship community, right? We're actually a nice bunch of guys that would like there to be more modelers doing our thing. We're not there to pull everybody apart. So generally, ship modelers and boat modelers kind of look after each other, and because we're kind of like the black sheep of the whole modelling community in some ways, there's less of us, admittedly, right? But what we do is particular, and it is a lot more intense, a lot more going on. I mean, I get so many comments with my things my ships. And people go, they're lovely, I'd like to do one, but gee, there's a lot of stuff that you do, like 100 cannons to put on the thing and all that rigging and, oh, goodness me. But we just take it in a stride, it's what we do. And sure, the models might take a little longer. They don't cost much more, honestly, really, they don't. They're about relatively on par. But your value for money is huge in a ship. So I think basically ship modelers are too bloody busy doing their own thing, having a ball of a time, to be even worried about rivet counting, right? There's none of it. The only instance is, well, it was a case where I saw a model on YouTube and it's a guy I know, so I didn't go in and blast him. I just went, mate, do you realise your sails on upside down and, your ropes are kind of wrong there, wrong colours and everything? And he went, oh no, oh dear. He said, well, I looked at this one in the museum and that's how it was. I said, oh, you're probably right. And they've probably got it wrong. But I said, look, here's what it should look like. I said, don't change your model. Your model's great. But just for future, they kind of go up that way, not that way. So, and that was the thing. If he'd said, look, I don't care. It's my model. I'll build it over on one. Or, look, it's just I'm building it like the one in the museum. I'd have gone, fine, not a problem. And I could have said, do you want to know how it should be for future reference? And if he said no, I'll go, fine. Okay. Again, asking permission, sharing, not telling, sharing information. And I think the boating and the shipbuilding community are more like that. We're always sharing techniques and way to do things. And the thing is, at the scales we work and with the complexity of these ships, we know we'll never get them exactly correct. It is impossible. So it's always an approximation. The rigging, there's no way we could put every rigging line on. It's next to near impossible unless we built a really huge model. So our rigging is most of it that looks good. And in fact, the rule usually is don't try and put too much rigging on because it actually looks wrong when you try and put every line on. Put just enough so that it looks good and it's indicative of how a ship would be rigged. And that's the thing. Same with, I'm not just talking sailing ships, I'm talking like your battleships and everything. The number of lines there for signals and things that hang off stuff, and there's all kinds of lines that run around even on basically a motor ship, right, a battleship or what have you. And there's no way in 1/700 scale or even 1/350 that you will get every line on there. It's impossible. If you tried to, it would look silly. So this is the thing. I think the shipbuilders and the boat builders were a bit more forgiving. The only case there was a little bit of rivet counting once was the camo scheme that I put on the Schnell boat, right? And that was probably because there were armour builders and didn't realise that ships could have camo as well. And they're well documented. All the ships with their camouflage, it's well documented. And all the stuff's out there and you can research it and you can, like I did with my Schnell boat. You can have red candy stripes on the bow. You can have green decks, right? And you can have wavy sort of groovy kind of psychedelic sort of paint job on the side. They did paint them like that. That was what happened. So I think, if you want to avoid the rivet counters, build ships. At least ships that go on the water. Which brings me on to the next subject. The next group of rivet counters. They are the most egregious, the most heinous, the most bottom-dwelling, basement-living scumbags that you have ever had the misfortune to have anything to do with. And who am I talking about? I'm talking about the SciFi Rivet Counters. Yes, that's right. Look, the stuff's, imagine, unless it's a real spaceship and you've got a photograph of it, right? And that's what you're building, then sure, you can go, well, it should be like that, okay? Otherwise, guess what? It's make-believe. Yes, it's all made up. Okay, sci-fi is imagination. All right, the vehicles and things in it. Okay, and they're in their TV programs or in their movies. Okay, they're imaginary, and even then they would have used 2 or 3 different versions. And over a series of television, they change anyway. Right, they look slightly different, and often in the close-up shots, we're only using small, 1-to-1 scale mock-ups where it's maybe only the section they're going to shoot with someone hopping in a cockpit or something. Right. They're all different. I mean, you got to go look at Battlestar Galactica. The Vipers that are actually on the deck that are full size are completely different. The Vipers are in the animation, right? And then other shots where it's wider and the Vipers are tiny, they're slightly different. It doesn't matter. But we know what a Viper kind of looks like. So, you get a kit, it's kind of like that. I mean, if you want to, again, research and get yours just like a particular scene in a particular movie, that's fine. But what happens with these sci-fi guys is they go berserk. They simply lose their shit, all right? You build something and they will put pull it to pieces. I've never known such a bunch of venomous vipers in my whole life. They just descend on you. No, that version of Thunderbird 3 actually only had a little winkle here, and it was slightly, your shade of orange is exactly 1 degree hue off to the left, and yeah, you know, they just count everything. And like, don't ever build a bloody Enterprise. Oh, dear me. I mean, there were so many different ones, and even in the shows, they were slightly different in the show. As I said, they changed during the series. They're different, depending which model they're using, the shot and everything. I mean, I know that from working in television, you have different mock-ups of different things. There can be slight differences between them, okay? Which isn't apparent when you're kind of building them and doing stuff, because people go off in their own direction with adding detail. So, you know, the smallest one is often the more detailed, and as it gets bigger, actually they're simplified for construction. That's how it goes. I worked in the industry, I know. But these guys will just go apeshit over, you haven't got that right colour, or it should be like this, or in episode 15, when Spock pulled his finger out of his green ear, blah, blah, blah. They are ridiculous, okay? They just pull things apart. And again, imaginary. It's all make-believe. Yes, guys. I mean, it's not even a thing to get head up about and worried about. It's not going to ruin the world. It's not going to create world peace. It's not going to feed the hungry. You're a bunch of fuckwits, okay? Really. Pull your head in, you bunch of drongos. And I'm laughing because I've had to suffer these guys sometimes. And often I'll build my spaceships and I don't put them on YouTube for that particular reason, is that, oh, bloody Rivet Counters. All right. Well, I think we've said enough about that. I'm sure there'll be a few people getting all upset and excited in the comments. That's fine. I'll probably delete most of them. Or if you are, like in some previous video, people got pretty hostile and nasty, you'll get reported, right? So if you are going to comment on this video, be constructive, be funny. I like jokes. Like, you can be funny about it. I love it, right? You can't go wrong with a joke. That's fine. But don't take things so seriously, please. I mean, the Rivet Counters, that's their problem. They don't have a funny bone. They're too damn serious about everything, all right? Now, I like to get my models right, but I like a joke, and I'll take it both ways, okay? So, yeah, that's all I've got to say about that. Now, if you did like this video, please hit the like button, right? And, you know, talk about the comments, yeah, just be civil about it. Just be nice. Tell me a joke. That'd be great. And if you do like what I do on this channel, subscribe, right? And if you really like what I do and you've got bags of money, okay, then please sponsor me at Patreon or as a YouTube member, and that gives me the cash to keep doing this sort of stuff, okay? Because I've got to feed that cat. It's got to be done somehow. All right, well, that's enough for now. I hope you enjoyed this video in the spirit that it was intended, all right? And maybe then it just brought a laugh to you for the day, because that's all it was. In these trying times, I'm just trying to crack a joke, all right? About a subject, yeah, it's kind of serious, but it's not really. We're just poking fun at those idiots. And I hope they saw the absurdity of what they do, and maybe they'd think about it. Who knows? We might have changed the world. Probably not. All right, that's it. It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harriet Denny.